I'm going to talk to you today about authorized plan use, and in particular, the previous methods used by this commission to calculate authorized plan use in previous designation considerations. And I'm going to summarize the written testimony that I've submitted. The staff submittal that you have before you recommends that you put to an indefinite period of delay this process for further fact-finding, and one of the reasons for doing that is so that you can spend time trying to figure out what the authorized planned use is for water in this aquifer. Along with my colleague, Dr. Bianca Isaki, she and I have spent over a month looking at authorized plan use, how the Commission has applied it before, and how it's been calculated. And I can just tell you, it is a rabbit hole with a lot of dead ends and a lot of very difficult issues. And we don't believe that you're going to accomplish much if you delay the process to calculate authorized plan use. I'll also note, before describing what the Commission has done before, that authorized plan use and its calculation is really not critical to your determination of the National Park Service's petition. What we've raised is concerns with the way that sustainable yield is used as a management tool, and particularly, as Dr. Coutillo has talked about, the location of wells. Because under almost any sustainable yield, if wells are located in certain areas, they can have an effect on public trust resources. With that said, what is APU? The definition of the first criterion was put on the screen earlier by Roy, and it refers to authorized plan use. There's two main parts to it. The planned use or existing use of water by a development that has received its state land use classification, so that's the first part, and its county development plan / general community development plan approvals. That's what the definition says. What the definition does not say is almost as important. It doesn't give you any guidance as to how far in the future you're supposed to look. It doesn't even define what a development is. And it doesn't define for future developments how you calculate the potential water duties of those developments. Because of those reasons, any APU calculation, and I'll describe this more, can come up with a hugely varying number of what the future authorized plan uses for water in this area. So as I said, we went back and we looked at all the administrative record that we could get from the Water Commission from previous designation attempts. Unfortunately, the Water Commission has never used the same method twice. They've looked at community development plans and not looked at community development plans. They've looked at land use designation and not looked at land use designation. For the Windward Oahu designation, they looked at population growth scenarios. Not only have the methods been varied, but it's also not entirely clear that any of the previous methods used by this commission, including the method used on Maui, which was tallying up future water commitments and building permits, complies with the legal definition of authorized plan use in the code. Even with those caveats that those might not be the legal planned, meet the legal definitions of authorized plan use, what we did was we took the previous methods from Lanai, where designation did not occur, Iao, the final designation that was done, Windward Oahu, and Molokai, and we applied those methods to try and say, okay, if you use those old methods, what is authorized plan use in this area? The calculations we came up with ranged from about 5.2 million gallons a day of authorized plan use to about 16.8 million gallons a day of authorized plan use, a very wide range, and that depends again on what water duty you use and how far into the future you look, so the range themselves could be much higher. But I will point out that all of those calculations using your previous methods are significantly higher than what the county has suggested to you. First, they suggested authorized plan use is 5.5 million gallons a day, then most recently 3.5 million gallons a day. In the alternate, you could try and do a strict application to the degree possible of what's in the law. And the starting point would be to look at, according to the county planning department's presentation to you on November 19th, that there's 16,600 acres of urban zoned land within the Keauhou Aquifer in the state land use urban district. All of that state land use urban land is within the urban growth boundary of the 2008 Kona Community Development Plan. So you know you're going to have to look at potential uses on all of that land. But here's where it starts to fall apart, and Roy Hardy of your staff actually started to talk about it. There are 3 planned transit-oriented developments in that plan, and an unlimited number of traditional neighborhood development possibilities where density bonuses are allowed for compacting development. If you look at those numbers and you start to use various water demand numbers, various potential numbers of transit-oriented developments and traditional neighborhood developments, you can come up with authorized plan use numbers ranging from numbers lower than what the county has presented to many, many multiples of sustainable yield. Instead, what you could also look at is zoning. Now, zoning is much more conservative than the definition of authorized plan use, because by definition, anything that is zoned has to be in agreement with the state land use classification, the county development plan. And that calculation was already done for you in the water use and development plan that you approved and the county approved. And it said just under zoning, full build out of zoning, water demand for existing zoning was going to be 103% of the sustainable yield in this area. So what does all this mean? You know, water use projections are important and planning is important. It's really core to the overall goal of the code. The code is not trying to step in the county's shoes and saying what you should and shouldn't do with land, but it's trying to enable the county determined goals, the home rule determinations of the county to say, if you want to do this with your land, we need to assure that you have enough water available to do that development while protecting public trust uses of water. So you need to look at zoning and this disconnect that exists in this area between what the county's goals are for development and the amount of water that's available. But if you spend your time, an indefinite period of time, trying to calculate authorized plan use, you can come up with any range of numbers, and I can guarantee you that there's going to be people who think the number is too low and the people who think the number is going to be too high. Instead, you should make a finding, and to a degree in your preliminary findings of fact, you did make a finding. You said, on page 53, by the time zoning and water commitments are made, there's no water planning to be done. So zoning commitments are already made in this aquifer to the tune of 103% of sustainable yield by the county's own data. You can plan for this future use of water and assure that the county's development plans and goals can be reached, but you only can do that under the issuance of water use permits, where you have to look at whether the use is reasonable and beneficial. In other words, is it efficient and is it in compliance with existing zoning and planning requirements? So for these reasons, we believe that the staff recommendation to defer indefinitely this process to calculate authorized plan use is not going to be a productive use of time for the commission, for the staff, or for any of the parties. But instead, you should actually proceed to continue this process into the 90-day period. Thank you very much.